possibilities here. Russia is a big, powerful country. As far as I can see, the Putin regime is pretty solid. It's not panicking. The mobilization is taking place, and it's not just that they will put more troops on the ground, they will change their tactics. Until now, for instance, they have not bombed the railroad bridges over the Dnieper. They have left alone the railway system in general, for the most part. I think they are going to become far more aggressive in terms of destroying basic infrastructure, as well as when the ground hardens in the winter, probably going on the offensive. I'm terribly impressed with how the Ukrainians have fought. They've shown a lot of resistance and a lot of amazing spirit. I know several Russian war correspondents, and they also say that they admire Ukrainian fighting spirit. This is such a huge tragedy, and I'm afraid that Putin has made it even harder today to perhaps come to some kind of an accommodation, because wars all have to end, and they seldom do end with full satisfaction or full realization of international law. As much as you want to believe that aggressors will be punished, all through history they often get their way. So I don't know, but this is really today a deepening tragedy, and I can't see any way out of it.
Alexandra, there's the other question that comes to mind, which is now with the annexation happening, especially Zaporizhia, will also come to Moscow's nuclear subjection. And we all know how fragile the nuclear reactor is at a time when the UN has been pushing for a demilitarized zone around Zaporizhia. What is going to be the impact of the Russian occupation around Zaporizhia?
Well, as you can see, by blackmailing the whole world and threatening to use nuclear weapons, we can see that Russia and Putin is nothing but a nuclear terrorist, and it's very dangerous. But I still believe that he is bluffing, even though he might use any kind of provocation at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. It might happen because Putin is dangerous. He has cornered himself. But to prevent this, we need to do one thing altogether, the whole world. We should completely isolate the crazy dictator, because Putin is behaving as Hitler during the Second World War. He's trying to drag into his grave the whole country. And to prevent this, we should show more solidarity, and we should totally isolate Russia as rogue state, as terrorist state.
Fred Weir, is it fair to say that Putin is bluffing?
I have spent a lot of time asking a lot of Russian experts, foreign policy people, exactly this question, because it really is important to know what he meant in that speech last week, where he said, anyone who threatens our territorial integrity, because that was a change from Russian nuclear doctrine.
Right.
Russian nuclear doctrine says that nuclear weapons would be used only in the event of an existential threat to the state, or when nuclear weapons have already been used against Russia. He moved the needle on that. Maybe he meant it, maybe he didn't. But whatever the case, once Russia declares that these territories are now part of Russian Federation, then the nuclear deterrent will apply to them. It doesn't necessarily mean that if someone attacks those territories, they will fire back with nuclear weapons. In fact, Ukrainian forces have been attacking Russian territory from the beginning of this war. So the Russians don't shoot back with nukes. But this has changed the situation and made it like not only more dangerous.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, because I'm running short of time. And my last question to both of you, let me actually take that from my second guest as well. How critical will be the UNSC resolution now and the responses of India and China with regards to the UNSC resolution condemning the annexation referendums that will be passed today? Alexandra, can you hear me?
You mean, yeah, it's a question to me.
Yes.
Sorry.
Right.
The resolution, UN resolution, if we're talking about General Assembly, has only recommendatory character. Obligatory character has resolutions of Security Council, but unfortunately, because Russia will be using its veto power, we cannot hope to get such resolution. But at the same time, I'm sure that Putin threats and his blackmail, his bluffing, will cause such countries as India and China to understand that Putin is dangerous. And they will also try to influence him, to put pressure on him to stop his very dangerous for the whole world behavior.
All right. Many thanks to you, Alexandra and Fred, for joining our discussion today. And with that, it's a wrap of this newscast. And before I do that, let's also bring you another story. When we talk about designer labels, the first thought that comes to our mind is that it will be expensive or out of reach for a common man. Now, a new marketplace called Brand New that curates lifestyle brands by designers all over the world, Brand New is dispelling this myth by now bringing affordable, well-designed products in apparel, jewelry, accessories, home and living category. They host live pop-ups and digital experience centers for products, touch and feel. Come and experience a unique shopping experience that is called Brand New. You can check it out online at shopbrandnew.com. And with that, it's a quick wrap of biggest exclusive tonight. Up next is Plain Speak with Shivani.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks a lot for staying with us. You're watching Plain Speak with me, Shivani Gupta. After playing musical chairs for weeks, it's official now. Congress Trivandrum MP Shashi Tharoor and leader of opposition Mallikarjun Kharge will fight it out for the Congress's top job. Both senior Congress leaders filed their nominations today. Kharge's candidature was in fact proposed by as many as over 30 party leaders, including Ashok Gehlot, former candidate, another former candidate Digvijaya Singh, Pramod Tiwari and PL Punia. In fact, many members of the so-called G23 also backed him. What does that mean for the rebel Shashi Tharoor then? Has he been abandoned? In fact, what does this mean for dissenting voices overall in the Congress party? Are they dead from here on? It is quite clear that Kharge is ahead in this race by far and is all set to be the first non-Gandhi Congress president in 24 years. Of course, provided there is no sting in the tail still. Remember, both the leaders belong to south of India, with minimum or almost no connect in the Hindi belt. Head-to-head versus the BJP, Congress lost 90% of the seats in 2014 and 2019 Lok Sabha elections in this Hindi belt. This is where they needed the biggest boost, but both faces will fall short of that requirement. The biggest question tonight, though, is, has the Congress managed to project that this was indeed a real exercise in opening up its leadership? We'll take that to our guests in just a bit, but first up, a quick SWOT analysis of both the candidates, their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. So let's go to Mallikarjun Kharge now. His strength is he's close to the Gandhi family. He also has vast organizational and administrative experience because he's been in high positions of the party. He's also, of course, held constitutional positions. His weakness is that he's 80, age is not on his side. He also has no connect outside of Karnataka. In fact, even in Karnataka, some could argue whether he has prevailing impact. What is his opportunity though? The opportunity is very much the fact that in Karnataka, the assembly elections are due next and him becoming the next Congress chief could well enthuse the party there. But what is the threat as far as Mallikarjun Kharge is concerned? He is going to be seen as controlled by the Gandhis, basically the Gandhi candidate, possibly not with much leg room or leeway as far as being able to do what the Congress chief needs to do, making some unpopular choices. Let's look at the SWOT analysis of Shashi Tharoor. Now, he's articulate, He has an appeal amongst the upworldly mobile, you could call them the youth, the educated, the middle class. But that also brings us to his weakness, which is that he's not really a mass leader. He also lacks organizational experience, even though he has been an MP multiple times. Can he really handle something as difficult as the top job of the Congress party? What is his opportunity though? If Shashi Tharoor was to become the next Congress chief, that can well and truly be seen as a fresh start for the Congress party, because he's been making discordant noises. He's not happy with the way the Congress is running so far. If he wins, that can truly be said as a fresh start. But what's the threat associated with Shashi Tharoor? Apart from the fact that he made a blunder today with a distorted map of India as part of his manifesto, he also, remember, had to quit as the MOS. He faced a controversy related to an IPL franchise and an inquiry over his wife's death as well. So there are, of course, issues that Shashi Tharoor can be attacked with. The biggest question is not so much who will win this race, but whether the Congress presidential race was rigged to begin with, making Kharge the obvious winner now with the nominations, the proposals, and of course, just what we've seen play out over the last 2 weeks or so.
The Congress President has assured me that the Congress Party has no official candidate and that the Gandhi family will stay neutral in this race and that they welcome as many candidates coming forward as possible.
कांग्रेस पार्टी के सभी नेतागण जो प्रोत्साहन किए और इस चुनाव में मुझे जो सहकार मिला उनको, उसलिए उनका फिर एक बार मैं आभारी हूँ। मैं जो लड़ाई हमेशा लड़ते हुए आया हूँ और लड़ना चाहता हूँ कि कांग्रेस पार्टी के जो उसूल है, जो आइडियोलॉजी है, उस आइडियोलॉजी के साथ मैं बचपन से जुड़ा हूँ।
Let's go across to our straight BJP versus Congress face-off today, because remember, the biggest challenge to the Congress is coming from the BJP. The biggest attack on their presidential election process is also coming from the BJP. Syed Nasir Hussain, Rajya Sabha MP of the Congress party and its national spokesperson, is joining me. Anurag Sharma, the BJP MP, is also with us. Mr. Nasir Hussain, let me come to you first up. How poor is this a start on part of your Congress elections, the formalization of the candidates, that just today Mr. Shashi Tharoor is under attack for releasing a distorted map of India as part of his manifesto? The BJP has already said this is the mindset of the Congress party itself. Don't you think this has been a major embarrassment, not just for the process of the Congress elections, but for the party itself?
Shivani, I think he has already apologized for the fall. I mean, for the map that was released by mistake. I think he has already done. I think there is no debate on that. And when Mr. Modi and the Chinese premier were meeting, I think China had a map on the national television channel without Arunachal Pradesh, without Kashmir and all those things. So let us not get into that debate. Okay, what is more important is that today Bharatiya Janata Party and its spokespersons are we're asking about the elections in Congress party, about the internal democracy in Congress party, and we were saying that this election is a sham and all those things.
Right.
Now today it is very clear that we have 3 candidates who are contesting the elections. About more than 9,500 electorate is there who will be electing the Congress president out of these 3 candidates. The election is wide open. Nobody is backing. Nobody, as somebody claimed in various television channels, that ये Gandhi's का candidate है, ये loyalist है और ये है तो वो है. Nobody is backing anybody. Nobody is an official candidate. You have Mr. Mallikarjun Kharge with more than 50 years of electoral politics. You have Mr. Shashi Tharoor, who is one of the best brains and articulate MPs in the country, who contested the UN election. And you have one KN Tripathi who was formerly a Jawan, an MLA, then a minister from Jharkhand contesting this election. I think we have time and again proved that we are the only party in this country, political party in this country, who have held regular elections for the post of president and for various positions in this country.
No, but this is your first election in 24 years, Mr. Nasir Hussain. Let's not forget that.
See, if somebody was contesting election and there were no other candidates in the fray, and if it was consensus, then nobody can help it.
Okay.
We had the process, we had the procedure, we had election at the grassroots level, at booth, ward, block, district level and state level elections were held. But for the post of AICC, if some other candidate was not coming up in open to fight against some other candidate, nobody can help it.
No, so you're saying that these elections are free and fair. That indeed is the question that I'm debating tonight. Yeah. Do you really think, before I bring in Anurag ji as well, do you really think the way things have panned out, first the Gandhis tap Gehlot creates a mess, then he's asked to bow out, Mr. Digvijaya Singh enters the fray, then says, I'll only withdraw if the Gandhis ask me to. The next day, today morning, we realize he's withdrawing. Mr. Kharge emerges as a consensus candidate. Mr. Nasir Hussain, can you, with your hand on your heart, really say that there is no tabbed candidate by the Gandhis, that this has been truly free and fair, where virtually anyone can fight? Why were people applying and then withdrawing, and then why were people being seen in the race and then backing out?
Shivani, I'll answer your question, but then the fact remains that neither somebody in the media wants to question whether the BJP had elections for the past 7-8 presidents they had at the national level, nor the media wants to accept that there are elections in the Congress party. Nobody asked Ashok Gehlot to contest the election. Nobody asked him to withdraw from the
Sir, how is that
possible? Nobody asked Digvijaya Singh to contest the election. Nobody asked him. No, Shivani, let me. You asked me a question.
But sir, how is it possible that nobody asked Mr. Gehlot to fight the election?
You should allow me.
He didn't want to be the Congress chief.
Shivani, you should allow me to.
Okay.
See, you should allow me to finish first. Then you can interrupt. Nobody asked Digvijaya Singh ji to contest the election. Nobody asked him not to contest the election or withdraw from the fray. Nobody, no Gandhi asked Mr. Mallikarjun Kharge ji to fight the election or file the nomination. Neither Shashi Tharoor ji. Said most of them must have consulted Gandhis. Most of them must have met the Gandhis or asked for the support or blessing from the Gandhis. Time and again, Mr. Rahul Gandhi, it's there in public domain that he said that it will be a free and fair election, will not be backing anyone. Nobody will be backing anyone, and nobody from the Gandhi Parivar will not be a candidate.
Fight, right.
So this is everywhere. So if you don't want to believe and you say that this is Gandhi's
candidate, I want to believe it, sir. Please don't put it to my
then we have to leave it to
my
your
not wanting or willingness to believe it. But I do have to keep my mind open and see the sequence of events. Let me go to Anurag Sharma now.
Please.
Syed sir is saying that this has indeed been a free and fair process. Nobody wanted Gehlot to fight. He wanted to fight. I find that hard to believe, given that he didn't really seem very interested in the Congress top job, wanted to keep his chief minister's position. Come on, it played out in public.
Shivani, thank you so much for having me on your channel. It's a pleasure to be here again. But Mr. Gehlot, come on, he just thumbed his noses at the Gandhis. And spectacle in Rajasthan, then why did you need to send 2 observers there? If Mr. Gehlot was to remain the chief minister, why were 2 people sent there? What was Mr. Markhan doing there? Why was the CLP meeting being called? It's just a whole sham, and all of us know this extremely well. The whole nation saw it for 2 days, the entire tamasha which happened in Rajasthan. So, and he's actually put the Gandhis in their place. He has proved to the nation, the country, that the Gandhis do not really have control over the elected representatives. Now, what is happening here in Delhi, what they're trying to do with the president's post is, you have a few loyalists in and around Delhi who really have no public standing or are mass leaders. So they need to choose somebody like a Manmohan Singh again. And they found, unfortunately, in Mr. Kharge, who is an extremely nice man, I presume. I don't know him personally, but I presume he has a lot of experience. But an 80-year-old gentleman is now expected to win and then help the party in 18 states. They don't even have one single MP. You've lost 90% of your seats in the Hindi belt. In UP, you have one single member of parliament. And he doesn't even speak Hindi.
Right.
How
I
is
take
this
that
going
too,
to
Mr.
revive the
Nasir
party?
Hussain. But Anurag
This is
Sharma, all
just-
of that is very good for you, right? You
Oh,
shouldn't
this
be
is
complaining
perfect.
about any of this.
We are not. We are happily sitting back and seeing this entire eyewash
Precisely.
happily in our homes and saying, thank God for this.
So precisely. But the question I want to ask you is, the Congress is saying at least we are having this election, right? When was the last time you held an election for the BJP president post?
Fair enough.
There
Now,
may have been some
the BJP
inconsistencies, there may have been some embarrassments, but they've put themselves through this, right?
Are they putting themselves really through it? Ask yourself in all fairness, are they actually putting themselves through an election process?
Yeah, it's
or
been
is it
quite-
just a
it's been
nomination
quite-
by the Gandhi family?
It's
It
been
seems to be
quite
only
bloody.
a-
It's been quite, it's hurt them actually in some senses, given what's happened in Rajasthan. But they're putting themselves through this exercise. It is playing out in public. They
It's
can well
playing out
argue.
in public. You have two more candidates who are probably been put up as dummy candidates. Unfortunately, they're probably not even going to get any of the votes. You saw the G23 leaders also today lining up. And Mr. Mallikarjun Kharge Saab comes out, holds a press conference and implies that he has the blessings of the Gandhi. And he says he's met the party leaders and he's very grateful for their support. We all know what that implies.
Right.
So this is just another Manmohan Singh sort of scenario being done, an entire eyewash.
Okay.
As far as the BJP is concerned, look at the amount of presidents we've had. So in the
Okay, fair
last
enough. I
24
don't have enough time
years-
to go into that. I think we've heard those arguments from both sides before. The processes and the structure of the parties are different. Yes, Mr. Hussain, the question though that Mr. Sharma raised, which I also talked about earlier at the start of the show is, are either of these candidates going to be able to enthuse you pan-India? Their reach and their connect is so limited. Shouldn't the Congress party have greater leadership emerge in its first presidential elections in over 2 decades?
Shivani, neither the media can decide who will be the AICC president, who can win the who can contest the election and not contest the election. Now the BJP can decide who can be the AICC president. First, the BJP is yet to convince the people of this country that they have an internal election. Let them tell the country who was the elected for the past 7-8 president that BJP had. What Mr. Nadda elected, what was Mr. Nitin Gadkari elected, or Mr. Amit Shah elected, or previous presidents elected. Who was their electoral college? Who elected them? When did they elect them? Was there a calendar of events? And do they have an independent election authority like the Congress has? What are they speaking? They are nominating their president for the past 30-40 years, and they are asking the Congress party and saying that Congress party's elections are a sham. And as far as who will enthuse and energize the Congress party, see, it's an election. Whoever wins the election will have to carry forward the vision, legacy and the ideology of the Congress party.
But sir, the question is, an 80-year-old Mr. Kharge,
reach out.
an 80-year-old Mr. Kharge,
Mr.
Mr. Tharoor, who has limited mass appeal.
Kharge has been Mr. Kharge has been in electoral politics for 50 years.
Yes.
He has been the PCC president of the Congress party in Karnataka 2 terms. He has been the CLP leader of opposition in the assembly, leader of opposition in Lok Sabha, leader of opposition in Rajya Sabha. Don't you think that 50 years of experience is enough for a person to build up his party?
Nobody is
Mr.
questioning
Shashi
his
Tharoor, who
credentials.
contested for the
One is
UN
only
election,
arguing,
Shashi-
is this a leadership for the future at age 80?
You have to wait and see. You wait for the candidate to win. They have filed the nomination. Let us see. Let us wait for the result. Let there be a new Congress president. You didn't wanted the Gandhis to be continued. The Gandhis said that we don't want to continue. Let there be someone else whoever wants to contest. Let them contest.
No, but of course we can discuss the candidacy, right? We can discuss what both candidates bring to the table. Also, I would like to correct you, Mr. Hussain. It is not me who didn't want the Gandhis as the president of the Congress party. Your own leaders were raising these questions. Please don't shoot off my shoulder.
Shivani, now let us not get to the let us not get to the debate of the Gandhis. We have seen what media has done and what the way BJP.
Sir, we've also seen electoral results. We could very easily argue. But I want to bring you back into the focus of the debate. Do you really believe that this process do you really believe that this process will turn out to be the change that the Congress party is looking for? Or will the more things change, the more they will remain the same? Ultimately, the decision-making voices of the Congress party will be the Gandhis.
So you have decided, so Shivani has decided that nothing is going to change. Shivani has decided and she is forecasting that nothing is going to change in the Congress party. She says she says that Mr. Kharge will not be able to turn around. Mr. Shashi Tharoor is a bad choice. If they are contesting the election, if they have such a vast experience, when they have led the party at different levels, they will lead the party at the national level.
Okay.
They will lead the party at the national level. So
Anurag Sharma, come in. Okay, Anurag Sharma, it's time for the BJP to stop attacking the Gandhis. First thing, it's time for the BJP to stop attacking the Congress's internal process. Ultimately, it is up to them who leads them.
Look,
let them speak about their internal
entirely
process.
their internal matter.
Let them tell the country
really
how their
accept
presidents are
that fact
elected.
that it's entirely their internal matter. As far as the BJP is concerned, this is the Congress's internal matter. But it's now slowly being confined to the pages of...
telling the country how their presidents are elected.
Shivani, can I
Okay, go ahead.
continue?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. This is entirely the Congress's internal matter.
Shivani, are you not asking him the...
Sir,
Shivani, are you not asking him the question whether they did have an election for the past 7-8 years?
Sir, I asked him just now. But let him finish that point now.
Whether they have an independent election authority.
Okay, let him respond now.
I'm not asking them whether they have an electoral
I'll tell you what.
post of president.
Mr. Hussain, I'll tell you what. I asked him that question, but I'll tell you what. From where I sit, the processes and the questions in front of the BJP and the Congress are entirely different. I don't think they are apples to apples comparisons. That's why I'm not making those comparisons. The BJP can very well and truly come out and say that we have consensus candidates as presidents, but none of them come from dynasties. Right? That's the question that the Congress is facing. The BJP is not facing that Congress. But I'll take your question. Sir, I'll take your question to Anurag Sharma. Let him respond.
You did not defend the BJP.
I'm not defending. I'm saying they are not apples to apples comparisons. They have different systems.
Democracy?
Right.
Okay. Internal democracy?
Fair enough.
Where is the internal democracy? Where is the election?
Okay. Let Mr. Sharma respond,
sir. Electoral college?
Mr. Sharma, please go ahead. Please don't interrupt him, Mr. Hussain. Let him respond for a minute. Yes.
Okay. Now, as far as we are concerned, what the G23 had really raised, it doesn't seem to be really holding any water anymore as far as the Congress is concerned. Their internal democracy seems to be in complete shambles. Can I get to the question, Nasir ji? I will answer the anchor, sir. I'll be very grateful if you allow me to have the time. If you wish to continue speaking, sir, I'll just remain.
Yes, Mr. Sharma.
So,
yes,
as far
Mr.
as
Sharma,
this is concerned,
if
you're not willing to listen, sir,
you should also answer the questions what we are asking.
Sir, I am.
The same question is for you also.
Listen, I will happily answer your question.
The same question is for you also. You should answer the question.
Mr. Hussain, I have limited time. Please let him finish. I'll come back to you. Yeah.
So, like I said, firstly about the G23, they've not been allowed. Now, let me have my 2 minutes. I have never interrupted anybody and I don't do that. So, after 24 years, they seem to have an election. Now, they're asking us about our election.
Yes.
We have to say, the BJP has what's called the National Executive. We have a parliamentary board. We all sit down. And fortunately for us, we've always had consensus. We've chosen people who do not represent any family. They've all been different candidates. We've chosen the most able person to lead us. And that's the reason why we are where we are today, where we've grown from strength to strength. We've constantly grown in every state. Every Karyakarta in BJP, from the booth adhyaksh to the president, comes from the party and is internally chosen by consensus.
Okay.
And sometimes, very rarely, but yes, sometimes we do have elections. We've had them in my own constituency where they were for Mandal Adhyaksh and other people nominated, where 2 to 3 people fought the election. We've had those. But that set aside, we've not had one single family. We have had no dynasty.
Okay,
Please
now,
look at the
but
entire
now
history
that
of
dynasty
BJP,
tag,
right?
the Congress is working very hard to remove. The BJP will have to accept that. It's not easy for a party like the Congress.
Let me also, Shivani ji, please answer that.
Yeah.
Let me also please answer that.
Mr. Hussain, I'll come to you. 1 second. Yes, Mr. Shashi.
That little tag which you seem to be saying, did that happen in Manmohan Singh's time when the Prime Minister himself was embarrassed in a room and an act of parliament was being torn in his face? You remember the policy paralysis the entire government went through, where one gentleman decided to tear it up?
Okay.
So
fair enough. So you're
that
saying
kind of president
the
is what
next
you're
chief
choosing.
is going to be probably remote control. The decision-making power will stay with the Gandhis. Mr. Hussain,
When they have done it with the Prime Minister, they will do it with the President. The President
okay, fair enough.
nothing.
I have only 30 seconds left. Mr. Hussain, that indeed is what everybody is looking out for. How free will the new next Congress chief will be? 30 seconds, sir.
Shivani, only time will say how free is the election and how the next president, who will be the next president and how will he perform as the president of the Congress party. That only time will say. Now, even now the BJP spokesperson has not let the people of the country know what is their internal democracy and how does it function. RSS appoints their BJP president. How can a parliamentary board of 8 to 10, 20 people can appoint a
we have a national executive.
What about
Please,
the grassroots workers? What about the state level leaders? What about the district level leaders? Sir, that is what I'm telling. That is the difference between BJP's internal democracy and Congress party's internal democracy.
Okay, fair enough.
We also had 30, we also were in power for 20, 25 states at a time. We were in power for our 65 years in this country. So that we lost election in 67, we lost election in 2000, in 1999, 1998, but we bounced back.
Okay,
so you don't don't think that Congress party is not going to bounce back. You have to watch out for the Congress party.
Let's see whether it is able to cross that hurdle or not as far as electoral results are concerned. But first up, all eyes will be on the Congress presidential elections. I do thank our 2 members of parliament for joining us for our big face-off. Now, the Congress doesn't always act like that, but it is desperate for a revival. Does that revival mean they need to sever their dependency with the Gandhis completely? Or will making a non-Gandhi its chief be enough? That's the big question I will take to my colleagues reporting on various aspects of this tussle in just a bit. But first up, take a look at the challenges a new Congress chief will face. The new chief will have the primary responsibility to stop the slide, not only in assembly elections, but also, of course, with 2024 coming in. We'll have to work harder in stopping the exodus of top leaders, young and old alike, leaving the party because of differences and not enough opportunities. Major challenges in many poll-bound states and infighting in several state units of the party will also have to be sorted out better than it has been done. The new leader will have to ensure central leadership is not seen as clueless and ineffectual and actually doesn't end up hurting the party further in states instead of helping. And finally, the major challenge is to kickstart the path of revival, implement changes, bring in a new vision, and not be stuck in this limbo where there is no serious introspection or attempt at change. Before I go to my colleagues, also listen in to how the chorus was very much for Kharge today, amidst his proposers and supporters, almost making it seem like the win is a done deal for him and that Mr. Tharoor has virtually no chance.
It is a good thing that they are there to give guidance to everybody, to the party, and they have done that. And I think in future also, people look up to them. And the Congress president, Kharge ji, will be elected. In fact, my appeal is that he should be elected unanimously.
It's a good choice. Kharge Sahab has got a lot of experience. So definitely it will have impact on the party. Majority of the congressmen will support Kharge ji.
I want to go across to Pallavi Ghosh, our senior editor, tracks the Congress party very closely. Aman Sharma, senior editor, News18.com, joining me in the studio. Incidentally, they're the Power Circuit team. You can watch their YouTube podcast on politics and everything on our YouTube channel. Amit Bhatt, input editor, News18 Rajasthan, is also joining us because remember, all of this presidential race has become very intrinsically linked to now what happens next in Rajasthan. But Pallavi, I am coming to you first up. What did you make? I mean, Mr. Hussain, you heard, was defending vociferously the fact that these elections are as free and fair as they can be. I'm not going to compare it to the BJP, but internally within the Congress party, do you believe they've managed to put the exercise that they wanted to, or have there been too many hiccups on the way?
No, I don't think they've been managed to convey the message which Sonia Gandhi wanted to convey, that this is going to be a very impromptu exercise where I'm going to be neutral. See, I've covered this party and everything, you know, everything seems to be falling in place now. It never falls in place when it's happening. It falls in place now, and each time when I see something happening, I said, oh God, I've been taken for a ride. It's not the way it looks as it is. But you know, very quickly, just to give a backdrop of it, I mean, I think the game changer in a sense became when Ashok Gehlot he rebelled or whatever. That's where Sonia Gandhi was angry, she was fuming, she of course predictably spoke to Priyanka as well as Rahul Gandhi, and this is the time for revenge. So how do you take revenge? You're not going to become the president. Which she thinks is a punishment, which I don't think he thinks is a punishment
for Mr. Gehlot.
Yeah, I think he must be like really happy, thank God it's not happening. And that's when she sent Mukul Basting, told him that when you go to meet Mrs. Gandhi, just tell her I don't want to contest. So, you know, just to make it sound very natural, and he says that and she agrees, and then the hunt begins. Who is it who can take the place? It can't be Mukul Basting because he doesn't tick the right boxes. It can't be just about anybody else. Kharge was a man, but Kharge was very, very reluctant. I mean, ideally he would want to go back to Karnataka, you know, whatever.
Have a role there.
Yeah, and have a role there, or, you know, at least fight there. And he also knows, we all know. I mean, a Congress president really, it's a very tough job. You can't do much. You're going to face the flak, especially if you're not a Gandhi.
But you'll be held responsible. Isn't it?
In the case
now,
of
if
Gandhi,
the next assembly elections they don't do well, it's the Congress chief's
But
head.
see, Shivani, how it works differently. In the case of Gandhi's, if you don't do well in an assembly
They were
election,
insulated.
they will say, they are national leaders. They are not supposed to look about state elections. No one is going to be that generous about a non-Gandhi Congress president. I think that's the problem. So that's how it happens. So I refuse to believe that it was not planned. I think it was very orchestrated. Suddenly everyone turns up in AICC. I saw those big bags of Mossambi and juices being made. Come on, they was absolutely scripted.
But I want to ask you, this fact that even G23 members, Pallavi, ended up supporting Mr. Kharge, does that mean that the internal rebellion, I don't want to call it the revolt, but internal dissent is over in the Congress party? Everybody's just come to terms with the fact that they're not going to win a Congress presidential election?
I think they're more miffed. They are miffed with Shashi Tharoor, that's one.
Okay.
So there's a different level of revenge happening there because he was a G23 member. And also a very senior G23 member told me that, you know, they have let us down. I mean, an Azad leaving, Kapil Sibal leaving, they're not supposed to have left. They're supposed to have stayed back and fight along with us. So I think it was that kind of, right?
Aman,
it is more, I think there are two issues here, Shivani. The first issue behind choosing the next Congress president, one is basically to, in a way, join the Congress, as a Congress Jodo Abhiyan, like what the BJP has been saying. That is the first priority, I think, of the new Congress president, because that is imperative to actually Congress getting its act together to win elections. In that aspect, I think Mr. Mallikarjun Kharge might be a better bet for the Congress. One, if you see that in the proposal list as well, there are from both camps, from the G23. So in a way, it's a good start. Both the camps in a way have got together and proposed Mr. Kharge's name. The second point, I think, because of his experience and his respect, you know, an 80-year-old having 50-year-long career, multiple time MP, multiple time PCC chief, I think he carries that weight. But what remains to be interesting is, I think the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. Next year, there's a Karnataka election coming up. Mr. Kharge comes from there, is a Dalit face of the party. Does the party do well in Karnataka, a state where Congress is actually strong in?
Can I ask you a question? How is Mr. Kharge, either of you can take this, going to solve the Siddaramaiah versus DK Shivkumar conundrum for the Congress party? Pallavi, who is he going to pick, and will he be able to take that decision? The next Congress chief has to sort that out.
Yeah, and ironically, it is going to be Mallikarjun Kharge. And ironically also, he was also one of the observers who went to Rajasthan, right? If Sonia Gandhi does not solve that problem now, he as a Congress president will also have to deal with that.
Is he up to it?
Sorry?
Is he up to it? Up to these challenges?
I think ideally this is one last decision which I think he wants Sonia Gandhi to take, because it's not going to be an easy one either which way, and you leave the dirty job to her, and also the calculation that perhaps the disgruntled elements will listen more to her than to him. I think that's the point.
Yeah.
Karnataka, I don't know, Aman. I don't think he's going to be too involved now, will he?
Well, I don't know. I think the more important pressing topic for Congress now is Rajasthan. Let's keep a very close eye on it. I think the Congress presidential election mess may have got sorted out today.
But that
please
mess
watch
is
out
still...
for Rajasthan. If the Congress takes a step to remove Mr. Ashok Gehlot as the chief minister, a big desert storm is brewing. I don't think the 80 MLAs, 80 to 90 MLAs which are backing Mr. Gehlot are going to sit silently. Mr. Gehlot will try his best not to get Sachin Pilot be made the next chief minister.
Let me take that to Amit Bhatt, because he's tracking this very, very closely in Rajasthan. Amit, आपको क्या लग रहा है? क्या अशोक गहलोत की कांग्रेस टॉप जॉब से तो मौका गया ही, क्या उनकी चीफ मिनिस्टर की पोजीशन भी अब जाने वाली है? आपको लगता है कि गांधीज ने मन बना लिया है, ऐसा सिग्नल आ गया है? क्योंकि ये तो लग रहा है यहाँ दिल्ली में बैठ के कि वो खुश नहीं है, कुछ ना कुछ तो ऐसे, जैसे पल्लवी ने वर्ड यूज किया रिवेंज, कुछ ना कुछ तो और पनिशमेंट मिलेगी।
देखिए शिवानी, अशोक गहलोत भले ही इसमें खुश दिख नहीं रहे हों, लेकिन इस वक्त तो सबसे ज़्यादा खुश अगर वो होंगे तो वो इस बात से होंगे कि उनको जो कांग्रेस अध्यक्ष का जो पद था उस चुनाव में उतरने का था, वो उनकी मर्जी के बिना, उनकी खुशी के बिना, क्योंकि वो कभी भी इस पक्ष में नहीं थे कि वो राजस्थान छोड़ करके जाएं। और ये बात वो कई बार अपने सहयोगियों को, जो यहाँ पर जितने उसके एमएलएस थे, जितने निर्दलीय थे या दूसरे और जो बाहर से सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं, उनको वो हर बार ये कह चुके थे। राजस्थानी में एक स्लैंग का इस्तेमाल करते हैं हर बार, मैं थांसू दूर को नहीं, मतलब मैं आपसे कभी भी दूर नहीं हूँ। तो ये हर बार जब ये कहने का मतलब ये था कि वो यहाँ से जाना ही नहीं चाहते हैं। तो सबसे ज़्यादा उनके मन की जो बात हुई है वो ये हुई है कि उनको वहाँ अब दिल्ली नहीं जाना होगा और यहाँ चीफ मिनिस्टर की तरह बने रहें।
बहुत बड़ा ब्लंडर भी तो हो गया है अब जयपुर में।
हम जो हमारी, देखिए शिवानी, क्या होता है कि कई सोर्सेज होते हैं जिनसे बात होती है, जिसमें टॉप लीडर्स भी होते हैं और उनके जो थिंक टैंक है उनसे ही बात होती है, जो आला कमान तक बातें पहुंचाते हैं, उनको चीज़ें पेश करते हैं, उनसे ही बात होती है। तो जहाँ तक ये समझ में आती है कि ये सब चीज़ें जो जितना भी हुआ है, अशोक गहलोत, देखिए अशोक गहलोत बहुत मजे हुए राजनीतिज्ञ हैं, बहुत मजे हुए नेता हैं, लंबा एक्सपीरियंस है उनको। 40 साल की अपनी जो वफादारी है कांग्रेस के प्रति, जो खुद बार बार कहते आए हैं, उसको केवल 1 साल की जो यहाँ पर मुख्यमंत्री काल इनका बचा था, उसके लिए वो इस तरह से दाव पे नहीं लगाएंगे। तो अब आप देखिए कि उन्होंने अपने जितने भी जो सिपह सालार हैं, जो कहते हैं हरावल दस्ते हैं, उनको अब इस बात पे लगा दिया है कि अजय माकन ने यहाँ पर पूरी तरह से अपने मैनेजमेंट में फेल हुए हैं। अजय माकन की तरफ से जो मिसकम्युनिकेशन हुआ था, उसकी वजह से ये एक बगावत वाली स्थिति आई थी कि CLP की मीटिंग के पैरेलल एक और मीटिंग यहाँ पर बनी, और जिस मकसद से केंद्रीय ऑब्जर्वर्स को यहाँ भेजा गया था, वो मकसद हो नहीं पाया, वो रायशुमारी हो नहीं पाई।
अमित, मुझे ये बताइए, क्या अशोक गहलोत की चीफ मिनिस्टर पोजीशन खतरे में है? और क्या अभी भी ऐसा हो सकता है, जैसे अमन कह रहे हैं कि वो बनने नहीं देंगे सचिन पायलट को, क्या अभी भी ऐसा हो सकता है कि सचिन पायलट को कांग्रेस जबरदस्ती चीफ मिनिस्टर बना पाए?
देखिए, दोनों चीजें इसमें हैं कि एक हाल फिलहाल अभी इमीडिएटली हम मुख्यमंत्री के उसमें कोई बदलाव नहीं देख रहे हैं। क्योंकि कांग्रेस जो है राजस्थान में अभी जो हालात हैं, उस हालात में ये खतरा कभी मोल लेना नहीं चाहेगी। अच्छा, KC वेणुगोपाल ने और यहाँ पर पहले ही बोल दिया है कि अभी हम अध्यक्ष चुनाव पे जो फोकस कर रहे हैं और राजस्थान के बारे में सोचा जाएगा बाद में। 2 या 3 दिन के बाद की बात कही है उन्होंने। लेकिन यहाँ पर जो अशोक गहलोत के कुछ और, जैसे हमारे यहाँ पर मंत्री परसादी लाल मीणा है, उन्होंने बहुत पहले कहा था कि कुछ नहीं होने वाला, अध्यक्ष नहीं बनेंगे और 19 तारीख के बाद ही जो होगा वो तय किया जाएगा। तो एक बात तो ये कि यहाँ पर बिल्कुल साफ नजर आ रही है कि अशोक गहलोत अभी फिलहाल CM पद से नहीं हटने जा रहे हैं। दूसरी बात, क्या सचिन पायलट, हाँ, और दूसरी बात कि क्या सचिन पायलट को यहाँ पर मुख्यमंत्री बनाया जाएगा या उनको कोई और जिम्मेदारी दी जाएगी? तो यहाँ पर अशोक गहलोत ही नहीं, उसके अलावा यहाँ पर जितने निर्दलीय जो सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं, RLD के एकमात्र विधायक हैं जो मंत्री भी हैं, डॉक्टर सुभाष गर्ग, वो, उनके अलावा जितने भी जो इनके सिपह सालार हैं, वो अब इस बात पर बार बार आते हैं। वो ये कहते हैं कि हम मानेसर कैंप की बात करते हैं कि मानेसर कैंप कि अगर किसी को कुछ भी दिया गया, उसे सीएम बनाया गया, तो उससे अच्छा है कि हम 1 साल पहले चुनाव में चले जाएं। मतलब बात इस हद तक जा चुकी है
जी, बिल्कुल बिल्कुल।
कि वो
So
लोग
the
मध्यवर्ती
threat is
चुनाव के
very
लिए
much
तैयार हैं।
there, Pallavi. So I don't think the Congress leadership will want to touch this beehive.
I don't know. I mean, if the decision is going to be taken out of revenge, then I will not be too surprised if Ashok Gehlot is replaced. And that's exactly what we were talking about also. If she wants to show that she's the boss, then you think from the heart and not so much from the head. And then she's going to get Sachin Pilot to become the CM.
Is it also a pressing time bomb, a ticking time bomb for them, Sachin Pilot? Because he's been waiting. Do you think they're going to be pressurized because of that?
I mean, their calculation is where can he go? I mean, why would the BJP need him in Rajasthan?
They tried in 2020 but failed. BJP could not get the numbers with Sachin Pilot.
He doesn't have the numbers.
They only
It's
have
as simple
17 to
as
18
that.
MLAs with him. I don't think the Congress would want to touch it right now. There was still a year to go in government, and replacing, I think, Mr. Gehlot at this time will not only destabilize this government of Rajasthan but also dent, I feel, a very big blow to Congress actually returning to power in Rajasthan. It has a cyclic nature, the state's politics, and removing Mr. Gehlot, I think, will be a body blow to Congress' chances of also coming back to power in Rajasthan the
But
next
many
time.
also feel that actually the Congress has no chance to win again with Mr. Gehlot continuing. If they gave Sachin Pilot 1 year to enthuse the party and the cadre, then maybe they have a shot.
Well, I think that was the understanding, that Mr. Sachin Pilot would lead the party in the next election, maybe as being announced as the CM face for the next election. That was maybe the idea. So maybe doing it a year earlier when Mr. Gehlot is clearly not eager to leave his chair and who has 80 to 90 MLAs with him, I think it would be a disastrous step to replace Mr. Gehlot at this stage.
I'll come back to the Congress presidential race now in the last few minutes. Aman, you cover the BJP very closely as well. How is the BJP looking at this? They're obviously taking all kinds of pot shots. I don't think it was a great start. Just ominously speaking, with Mr. Tharoor making that blunder with the distorted map in his manifesto today. I mean, that's offensive to virtually every Indian. That's not about party lines at all. How do you think the BJP is looking at this?
Well, I think the BJP's line has been very clear from day one, Shivani. They have been clearly saying the biggest Darbari will become the Congress president. That has been the line the spokespersons have been taking from day one. And the nature of the election, why does Mr. Ashok Gehlot need to step out of the presidency? If the Mr. Gehlot would have filed his nomination, or why does Mr. Kharge go? Why does Mr. Digvijaya Singh withdraw at the last stage? So clearly, the election has become a bit of a mockery. That is what the BJP is pointing out.
But what are they going to do now when there's not going to be the Gandhi as the Congress chief? Ultimately, one of the biggest weapons is going to be lost, isn't it, Aman?
Well, yeah, that target at least is lost now. Everything can't be, the blame can't be laid everything on Rahul Gandhi's door.
They'll still do it, I think. I still think Gandhis are going to be very much omnipresent everywhere. Look at what Kumari Shelja was telling me today, that, I think in the fitness of things, Shashi Tharoor should opt out. Clearly, the party has got a dictate that he is the chosen one, he is the man. And Kharge will keep going to 10 Janpat, 12 Tughlaq Lane. They will keep on talking. And we're talking about now. Maybe after a year or so, there's a Sitaram Kesari moment. People are disgruntled and they'll say, Dekho, yahi hota hai if you don't get someone from the Gandhi family to lead the party. I mean, it's early days yet. I mean, picture abhi baki hai.
So, Pallavi, tell me finally, first of all, Mr. Tharoor, does he feel like he has any chance and this is some last-ditch effort? He also has made some noises that after he loses this election, he possibly has no future in the Congress party. Where do you see him right now? Where does he think he is?
I may be wrong, but maybe this is also yet something which is very convenient to the Gandhis. It adds on the narrative that let's have more and more people to contest the elections to make it look like a real election. But then, the problem is that this is what the Gandhis may be thinking. The rest of the Congress party is not able to keep their mouth shut. I mean, for example, Jairam Ramesh's reaction, very clearly he's brushing himself off. I mean, he's the media department head. And he's saying it's for Tharoor to decide how he's going to defend himself and his team.
Yeah.
So,
does Mr. Tharoor basically have a future in the party if he's not chosen as the next Congress chief? He's going to lose this election, which looks very imminent.
Yeah, but he's a man on his own. I mean,
he's already a man on his own.
He's always been a man on his own. I mean, I don't think he has too many friends in the Congress. He's more friends in other political parties. TMC may other parties, but less in the Congress.
You were saying there are no options for Sachin Pilot. Is there an option for Mr. Tharoor?
Well, I think Mr. Tharoor is a suave face of the Congress. He comes from Kerala, where the party, has the maximum representation right now. But even the Kerala unit didn't back Mr. Tharoor. So that is the status of Mr. Tharoor. He does have ideas. He's come out with the brochure, so that is a good start. He has, at least besides that map thing, rest of the brochure, he has some ideas how to decentralize the party. I think he's put forward a vision maybe even if Mr. Tharoor loses, maybe Congress can take a cue out of some of those points and actually implement them in the larger sense.
That doesn't sound like the Congress party.
That doesn't sound like
it. Doesn't do that.
No.
Well, I think the first priority, as I said, is Congress Jodo. It's to get everybody together. That is the first thing which they require to actually win elections.
And that leads me to my final question, and I'll go to Pallavi with that, because Pallavi, the other cue that we're all waiting to see from the Congress party is, after the president is decided, what happens to the Bharat Jodo Yatra? Who's going to then become the face of the Bharat Jodo Yatra? Is it going to continue to be Rahul Gandhi very much, or is the new president going to have a say and lead that yatra?
No, I think it's still going to be Rahul Gandhi, because, I mean, look at it. I mean, he's now leading the yatra and he's not the president. He's just a member of parliament. And he wants to project himself as, just another karyakarta, just another party leader. So he'll do that. What I'm going to be interested in is whether Kharge will join the yatra, whether he's going to tell. I mean, I can't imagine in a party like a Congress party, Kharge actually calling up Rahul Gandhi, telling him, tum ye karna aur wo karna, he listens to it.
That's not happening.
That will be a different Congress, but I won't recognize that party if I'm going to be covering it.
Well, who knows? Maybe there are some twists in the tail. We don't know. But there are no twists as far as the candidates are concerned, right? Mr. Tharoor will stick it out, or is he going to withdraw?
8th October is an important day, because that's the last day for withdrawal. Will they force...
Why would he withdraw anymore?
Yeah, but from the sound of his press conference, it certainly didn't sound that he's going to withdraw.
BJP will have a field day if he withdraws now, to say that no, he's
that will obviously look very terrible. All right, Amit, final word to you as well. In this entire tussle in Rajasthan, do you believe that ultimately Mr. Gehlot will end up having the last word? और क्योंकि लोग उनके साथ हैं, MLAs उनके साथ हैं, तो उनको कुछ भी करना बहुत मुश्किल होगा. और आपको क्या लगता है, सचिन पायलट के सामने अब क्या ऑप्शंस हैं अगर ये सिचुएशन है कि मिस्टर गहलोत को नहीं हटा सकते?
सबसे पहले बात हम ये कहते हैं कि अशोक गहलोत हट पाएंगे या नहीं हट पाएंगे. अभी सारे बयानबाजियां बंद पड़ी हुई हैं, क्योंकि इनके ऊपर एक एडवाइजरी जारी कर चुके हैं कि कोई किस तरह का बयान नहीं देगा. लेकिन एक ये बात भी सामने आई है कि ऑब्जर्वर एक बार फिर से राजस्थान आ सकते हैं, आकर के 1-to-1 जो है वो बात करेंगे, उसके बाद में 1 लाइन का रेजोल्यूशन पास करवा सकते हैं. ऐसे में हम देखते हैं 102 विधायक राजस्थान के हैं, जिनमें से अगर अशोक गहलोत को, जिसको भी अगर सीएम बनाना है, बनाए रखना है, उसको 52 का नंबर चाहिए, वो डेफिनेटली अशोक गहलोत के पास में है. तो ये तो समझ में साफ साफ आता है कि अशोक गहलोत अभी अगर जो इनका ड्यू कोर्स है उससे जाते हैं तो हटने वाली बात में नहीं है. सचिन पायलट के पास में जो ऑप्शन अगर बचते हैं तो वो ये क्लियर अगर कुछ भी नहीं कहते हैं, तो उन्होंने तो ये बोला हुआ है कि कल जब रात को इनकी सोनिया गांधी से मुलाकात हुई थी तो आकर के उन्होंने बाहर यही कहा था कि 2023 की चुनाव की तैयारी करनी है, सरकार को रिपीट करना है और मिलजुल करके काम करना है. तो अल्टीमेटली उनके पास में यही एक ऑप्शन बचता है.
राइट. आई बिलीव देयर वाज ए लीक्ड image of the papers that Ashok Gehlot was carrying, in which it very clearly said SP will leave for the BJP.
And join the BJP.
Basically, Mr. Gehlot is saying, if you drop me as chief minister, the government is also going along with me. So he's made that case, I think, very clear to Sonia Gandhi. There's a real danger to the government.
She didn't even bother to listen to what he was saying. I mean, he didn't even get to show her the paper. That's what I was told.
But he was prepared at least.
He was very well prepared, yeah. But look at the smile Sachin Pilot had when he came out.
Sachin Pilot has been smiling for the last 2 years, Pallavi.
Yeah, that's also true. But yesterday's smile was a little broader.
Nobody can decipher Sachin Pilot's smiles, I think.
Well, I don't know who to feel for more as far as this entire saga is concerned. I don't think anybody comes out looking great. Yeah. We'll see how the process still finishes as far as the Congress president elections is concerned. What impact that has for the Congress party, what impact that has in the states that are going to polls, in the states they have issues in, and ultimately ahead of 2024. I do thank all of my colleagues, Aman, Pallavi and Amit, for joining us for this interesting editors roundtable. With that, it's time for me to slip into a very short break. On the other side, we'll get you the day's biggest update.
Gandhi International Airport will become India's first 5G-enabled airport. What does this mean? Passengers flying in or out of Delhi can experience 5G services. 5G services will be provided at the domestic departure pier. In fact, 5G services will also be there at the international arrival terminal, the baggage area in T3. Travelers will be able to enjoy 20 times faster data speed. Passengers will require a 5G-enabled phone and a 5G-enabled SIM card. Akash Ambani, the head of India's largest telecom firm, Jio, has been named in Time magazine's 100 list of rising stars. The The magazine has called Ambani the scion of the Indian industrialist royalty who was always meant to rise in the business. He is the only Indian on the list. 2 blasts were reported in Jammu and Kashmir's Udhampur today, and this comes just a week before the Home Minister is on a multi-day visit to Jammu.
The first blast was in an empty bus parked near a petrol pump. Locals claim the bus used to be parked at the spot daily. After 6 to 7 hours, another blast went off in a bus parked at a stand. The roof and the back of the bus were blown away by the blast. 2 people were injured in one of these blasts. Preliminary investigations suggest that these were IED blasts.
जो छत है यहाँ से IED ब्लास्ट हुआ है, इसकी हालत देखिए, जो छत है उसके ऊपर कच्चे उड़ गए, पूरा शदीद तौर पर सारी जगहों पे आप देख सकते हैं इस बस को डैमेज पहुंचा है.
A team from the National Investigation Agency reached Udhampur district to probe the mysterious blasts.
US Vice President Kamala Harris visited the demilitarized zone that divides both the Koreas. This comes a day after North Korea fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles off its east coast. Harris condemned Pyongyang's actions and underscored that the United States is committed to defending South Korea. Hurricane Ian has crossed Florida, but it's left behind a trail of destruction.
It is one of the most dangerous storms to hit the US in years. It brought catastrophic storm surges, wind and flooding. When Hurricane Ian made landfall, it smashed into Florida coast with the wind speed of up to 241 kilometers an hour. Roofs were blown off, floodwaters surged inland and trees ripped out of the ground. $2.4 million homes and businesses in Florida were left without power. The Category 4 hurricane was later downgraded to a tropical storm. And people have been urged to stay put in shelters.
Queen Elizabeth's death certificate states that the 96-year-old died of old age. The document was signed by her daughter, Princess Anne. Britain's longest reigning monarch died at her Balmoral estate in Scotland on the 8th of September, around 3.5 hours before the news was announced to the world. Vladimir Putin's partial mobilization orders have triggered massive traffic jams at the Russia-Georgia border.
The mass exodus of men, either alone or with their families, began on the 21st of September, shortly after Putin's address to the nation. It has only been growing since then. With airline tickets mostly sold out or completely unaffordable, Russian men filled up their cars and joined the long lines snaking on roads towards the borders. According to the government of Georgia, more than 53,000 Russians have entered the country since last week. There is rising fear of travel bans and possible border closures, with reports of some men already being turned away by Russian bodyguards. Putin announced a partial mobilization to add at least 300,000 troops to its forces in Ukraine. In Russia, almost every man is considered a reservist until the age of 65. Having personal combat or military service experience is the main criterion in the call-out.
All right, Russia will formally annex 4 Ukrainian territories Friday. The signing ceremony will take place in the Kremlin. 4 Ukrainian regions which have been occupied by the Russian army, which includes Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson and Zaporizhia. Moscow has organized referendums in all these 4 regions. This move comes 8 years after Moscow annexed Crimea. It's a big blow. Indian pacer Jasprit Bumrah has been ruled out for the T20 World Cup after he complained of back pain. Bumrah did not play the first T20 against South Africa on Wednesday. Bumrah travelled to Bengaluru to undergo fresh scans on his back. After Team India's big win on Wednesday, fans got a glimpse of Virat Kohli's video call with wife Anushka Sharma. We leave you with lawyer tried to run over a woman traffic constable near Mumbai, and this is what ensued.
The constable had seized the scooter of an advocate.
Thanks a lot for staying with us. Let's take you to Ambaji in Gujarat, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi is finishing his 2-day visit. He's addressing the crowd in Gujarat. Let's listen.
Bol mari maa, bol mari maa, Jai Maa Ambe. आज मां के 5वें स्वरूप स्कंद माता की पूजा का दिन है। इस शुभ अवसर पर आज मां अंबे के दर्शन और पूजन करने का सौभाग्य मिल रहा है। अंबाजी में माता के दर्शन करने के लिए एक प्रकार से मैं कहूं तो मां की गोद में ही हमारी जिंदगी बीती है, आप सबकी भी बीती है। और हम हमेशा अनुभव करते हैं, जब भी यहां आते हैं एक नई ऊर्जा, नई प्रेरणा लेकर के जाते हैं, नया विश्वास लेकर के जाते हैं। इस बार मैं ऐसे समय में आया हूं जब विकसित भारत का विराट संकल्प देश ने लिया है। 130 करोड़ देशवासियों ने लिया है कि 25 साल के अंदर अंदर हम हिंदुस्तान को विकसित राष्ट्र बना के रहेंगे। मां अंबा के आशीर्वाद से हमें हमारे सभी संकल्पों की सिद्धि के लिए शक्ति मिलेगी, ताकत मिलेगी। इस पावन अवसर पर मुझे बनासकांठा के साथ साथ गुजरात के अनेक जिलों को हजारों करोड़ रुपए की योजनाओं का उपहार देने का अवसर भी मिला है। आज जिन 45,000 से अधिक घरों का लोकार्पण और करीब लोकार्पण और शिलान्यास मिला दें तो 61,000, उन सभी लाभार्थियों को भी मेरी तरफ से बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं। उन बहनों को विशेष शुभकामनाएं जिन्हें आज अपना घर मिला है। इस बार आप सभी की दिवाली नए घर में मनेगी, अपने खुद के घर में मनेगी। આપણને આનંદ થાય કે ના થાય ભાઈઓ? પોતાના ઘરમાં દિવાળી ઉજવવાની વાત આવે અને જેણે જિંદગી ઝૂંપડામાં કાઢી હોય એને પોતાના પાકા ઘર.
That's the Prime Minister speaking currently at Ambaji in Gujarat. Prime Minister Narendra Modi also inaugurated a slew of projects earlier in his home state. He flagged off Vande Bharat Express. The train will be connecting the state capitals of Gujarat and Maharashtra and will run 6 days a week. On his 2-day visit to Gujarat, he also inaugurated Phase 1 of the Ahmedabad Metro Rail project.
देश के 2 दर्जन से ज्यादा शहरों में मेट्रो या तो शुरू हो चुकी है या फिर तेजी से काम चल रहा है। पुराने शहरों में सुधार और उनके विस्तार पर फोकस के साथ साथ ऐसे नए शहरों का निर्माण भी किया जा रहा है जो ग्लोबल बिजनेस डिमांड के अनुसार तैयार हो रहे हैं।
Prime Minister Narendra Modi's convoy stopped for a brief minute to give way to an ambulance while he was travelling from Ahmedabad to Gandhinagar. This happened when he was on his way to the Raj Bhavan in Gandhinagar after finishing his public rally on Friday afternoon. Bulldozers rolled out in Noida's Grand Amac Society over encroachments into common spaces by several apartment owners. This is the same society where a spat between Shrikant Tyagi and another resident over the same issue had triggered a major row last month. Madras High Court has directed Stalin government to grant permission to the RSS to organize a march on November 6. The High Court has also made it clear that authorities will face contempt action if they violate this order. The Tamil Nadu government had earlier denied permission to the RSS for holding a march on October 2, citing law and order issues. Rahul Gandhi's Bharat Jodo Yatra entered Karnataka today. The 21-day Karnataka leg will cover 7 districts and 511 kilometers before entering Telangana. A major terror bid was foiled by the armed forces in Jammu and Kashmir. Terrorists who came to disrupt the ongoing Agniveer Army rally in Baramulla district were killed in an encounter. Both the terrorists were linked with Jaish-e-Mohammed. Images of Richa Chadda and Ali Faisal's pre-wedding celebrations from Delhi are out. Remember, the couple is all set to tie the knot on October 4. Ukraine has claimed that a Russian missile attack on Zaporizhzhia has killed at least 25 people in a humanitarian convoy and wounded dozens of others. The convoy of civilian vehicles had assembled in Kyiv on Friday, preparing to leave the area. They were planning to visit relatives and deliver supplies to an area controlled by Russia when it was allegedly hit. Meanwhile, Moscow has annexed 4 partially Russian-occupied regions of Ukraine today. The move was widely expected following annexation votes that ended on Tuesday in the 4 regions. UN Chief Antonio Guterres stated that the annexation has no place in the modern world, but this follows Russia's pattern of hostile takeovers. Remember, the same thing happened in Crimea in 2014. An explosion at an education institute in Kabul killed over 19 and injured over 30. A witness claimed that a suicide attacker detonated explosives at the center. There were no immediate claims of responsibility for the attack. And finally, as we wrap this edition of Plain Speak, here's a special video. Olympic gold medalist Neeraj Chopra attended Grand Garba festivals in Vadodara, danced his way with the crowd even as the fans welcomed him with chants. We leave you with that. Thanks a lot for watching.
Namaste, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand. It's a big day. It's a big day that could alter the course of geopolitics, and it could have a direct impact on Bharat, ladies and gentlemen. Russia's annexation of Ukraine has now been officially ratified and certified by the Russian President Vladimir Putin. He's made that formal announcement where 4 regions of Ukraine, nearly 80% of the landmass, has now been annexed. Let's quickly try and understand the dynamics and the importance of this step. From Russia's point of view, Russia believes that it had to do anything that it had to try and protect its sovereignty. But from the world view and of course from America and Ukraine's point of view, a nation has been destroyed, and this is certainly not the way to go about things. Americans have called it nothing but a land grab. But let's look at the impact and the strategic importance of what's happened. Crimea was annexed in 2014. So this conflict has begun since 2014. Now what's happened is Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson and Zaporizhzhia will also have now been annexed. The declaration has been made. Let's understand the significance of this announcement today, that Russia's annexation of these territories, which have now been called parts of Russian territory and also independent regions. The reason is, ladies and gentlemen, what Russia has secured is direct access to warm waters, the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. And that's why Crimea became important, to protect this interest. And there itself, Vladimir Putin had said
that if NATO or the American or West moves closer towards the Russian borders and Ukraine gets involved, then clearly they will make this step, they will take this step. Why? Because largely all of Russia's trade to the rest of the world was happening through the ports here in Kherson, Mariupol, and of course Odessa. So this trip that includes Zaporizhia with a nuclear reactor, Kherson, and Luhansk and Donetsk, which also have access to the ports and this warm waters, and Crimea, Russia claims and Vladimir Putin claims he is securing himself. He's securing his position and Russia's position with access to warm waters, and of course pushing back the NATO forces or the West forces, which have been trying to influence and trying to increase its footprint in Eastern Europe. Now this move, why is it why does it have big geostrategic implications? First up, the control of Russians or Russia's control in Ukrainian territory is about 100,000 square kilometers, 18% into Ukraine. That would fly 18% of erstwhile Ukraine that will now fly the Russian flag. It's formal protection under the Russian army. So any more military action in these regions, now Russia will claim that if Ukraine or the Western forces or NATO gets involved, and any attack on these territories now will be a direct affront to Russia. Attack on the annexed territory to be deemed as attacks on Russia. Connects Russia directly to Crimea. And more importantly, the Black Sea. It's the warm waters. Pick up the Russian the world map. Look at Russia as a huge landmass. But where is the access to waters for trade, for global trade? It's just the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. Otherwise, it's all towards the North Pole and, of course, towards those parts which are difficult to navigate in the Pacific, far away from Moscow. That's the big problem for them. Control of Black Sea, access to key warm water trade route. It enables direct trade route to Europe, Asia and Africa. They don't have to go all around Southeast Asia to try and come back into Europe. And this is access into Turkey and from there into the Mediterranean. Buffer between Russia and NATO. This is what Ukraine was. And that's why Putin kept telling Ukraine, stay neutral and I'll stay back. Stay neutral and I'll stay back. But in September, there was a strategic security agreement. We'll talk about that. That was signed between Joe Biden and Volodymyr Zelensky, America and Ukraine, which set the ball rolling. There's nobody justifying the war, but this is Russia's point of view, and there is an American and a world view about what's actually happening. It's a vital economic artery to Turkey and the Asian markets. It's a whole nation that, from Vladimir Putin's point of view, he's protecting Russia's interests. It's an authoritarian regime. These are hard calls. An entire nation has been reduced into debris and also now under a huge mountain of debt. And we're talking about Ukraine here. Provides powerful naval power status to Russia again. So this is the big strategic control. But what does it mean for us as a nation, and what is India's view? The India view on this entire Russian annexation move. We'll try and get multiple perspectives. We have with us a guest joining us, Indian who is in Moscow at this point on the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and that's Aarti Tikku, founder and editor-in-chief of the New Indian. She'll be joining us. I have Dr. Sergey Goryanov. He is the president of IDC Russia and director WHD International Board. Joining us from Moscow, and Ambassador Parthasarathi, former diplomat, also joining us. Namaste, gentlemen. Thank you very much. And we'll have Aarti Tikku joining us in a bit. But Dr. Dvoryanov, many believe Russia has violated all laws. The world is looking at Russia as a nation that has trampled upon another nation's rights. And this is nothing but land grab. How would you want to respond to these accusations? Because Russia believes it's done all it has to do under Vladimir Putin to protect its sovereignty and its own identity and its own interests.
Yes, my vision, not only my, but vision of all experts inside Russia and outside Russia who knows history very well, who knows deeply history, that Russia is only one country right now, the guarantee of the peace, the global peacemaker, we can tell. Because even during the Soviet Union time, you know this very well, Soviet Union and Russia especially always support some small nation, not only in Asia, also in Africa, in different countries. And small countries, they have some their choice, their will, national will. And that's why we can see that population of eastern part of Ukraine, they speaks Russian language. Before, that part of land belonged to Russia. If you will see, if you can make some research of the history, you know this very well. That's why Vladimir Putin did this special operation to support this population who speaks Russians and belong to Russian culture, to Russian traditions, to Russian civilization, to Russian world. And during last 8 years, all Europe and Western countries, they completely was blind. They never take care about this conflicts, about this catastrophe. And that's why from Russian side, it was a completely wisdom decision from our government to support this population. And right now, it's historical moment. I'm so proud of my country. I'm so proud that right now, all the challengers from the Western countries to all Eastern part of the world, we can be in the right balance. We can be in the justice. We can support the humanity. That is most important, because it's only question to support population.
But Dr. Dvoryanov, 219 days of war. It started from 8 years from 2014, since the annexation of Crimea. But at what cost? An entire nation lies destroyed. Millions of people stand displaced in Ukraine. Russia can't say that it is only America and Vladimir Zelensky to blame, because Russia is accused of war crimes. Russia is accused of killing civilians, innocents in Bucha and so many other places. And Russia moved to control and militarily moved not just at this 18%, it moved to nearly about 25-26% of Ukrainian territory. It wanted to annex far more. It has settled for this region. That's the allegation. How would you want to respond to that?
First of all, I cannot use this word annexation. Of course not. That all traditional lands of Russia come back to Russian world. That's the most important. Crimea, before you know this very well, was given by the Khrushchev, Nikita Khrushchev, who was a completely not predictable guy. And he gave this part of Russian civilization to Ukraine. It was especially we can see like a bomb, in the geopolitical bomb even. Right now, Vladimir Putin, he took the very nice decision, proper decision. Mainly Western countries, they wash brain of the Western population regarding this. It's not a war. It's completely, you know this very well. Who wins the Hitler? Who wins this Nazi? Russia. Who always support small nations in Africa? Russia. Always we can receive only one proper answer for all the questions. Who is a big global peacemaker right now in the modern age? Russia. I'm very proud to be Russian, and I'm very proud right now that eastern part of the world population, it become more and more wisdom, and all this wash brain of the Western media not have any effect. So you should be only
Dr. Dvoryanov, see, there is a Russian point of view which has not been spoken about, and I have been, at least here on the right stand, we've put out both points of view. There is a Western point of view and a world view of war. India very clearly does not back any kind of conflict or war that ravages a particular nation. Russia, on the other hand, believes what is NATO doing at its doorstep when there is no Warsaw, and you have to protect your strategic interests as a nation. But at what cost? But at what cost is the question, and what will be the implications? So let's go forward and let's take this discussion forward into what will be the implications. Dr. Dvoryanov, please stay with me. I'm just going to bring in our other panelists and then I'll circle back to you, sir. Arti Tiku, you are in Moscow. How has this entire decision, the referendum, and how has it been, received all across Russia? Because there are reports that there is revolt in Dagestan. There are people who are upset with the referendum and also the entire recruitment drive that's happened. There are allegations that in all these regions, people have been asked to vote on gunpoint, literally. It's been forced. This referendum itself is a farce. This annexation is nothing but a land grab. and this is going to have huge ramifications globally.
Well, I was in downtown today, and what I really saw was that massive numbers of Russians came out in support of the referendum results. And clearly, people in Russia, people in Moscow, and including St. Petersburg, where I did go in the last few weeks, I noticed that by and large, the majority in Russia are backing President Putin. What you are referring to is clearly the Western point of view, and they are focusing on the minority voices. They are focusing on people who disagree with President Putin, who disagree with the partial mobilization of troops. But that number is minuscule. You cannot project an entire reality of Russia on just a few people who are opposed to President Putin's stand on the issue. Apart from that, I really think that, you know, the Western propaganda machinery, which is being lapped up by some of the Indian media, needs to really do a reality check. Because if Russia was really blowing up against President Putin, you would be seeing Russia in chaos. I don't see any chaos on the streets of Moscow or anywhere else in Russia. I don't see anarchy. I don't see the kind of media projection that the West is doing. Western media is a completely sold out, one-sided propaganda machine, which is basically pushing the narrative which is being peddled by Washington, D.C. And honestly, the only people who really are suffering are Russians and Ukrainians. The people who are benefiting is the US war machine. It is the military-industrial complex of the United States which is benefiting, and that is why, despite the fact that President Putin has come out in support of negotiations, there is no concession, and there is absolutely no interest by the West in resolving this, in bringing the two parties to the negotiating table, in bringing these two sides to a ceasefire. So I would really think that, you know, if the Indian media is lapping up this entire Western media narrative, it's very unfortunate, because I don't see this narrative on the ground here in Moscow.
But it's a different scene. Sanjay Suri is in ground in Kharkiv, and the scenes there are tragic. In this war or in this larger fight, Ukraine as a nation stands destroyed. It's under a huge mountain of debris and also a mountain of debt because of the entire conflict itself, and of course the amount of arms and ammunition that's been bought. Many would question the wisdom of Volodymyr Zelensky, but he's got a point of view. He's got a lot of people in Ukraine who are supporting this fight against Russia. It's all point of views, and every nation will look at it from its point of view. You are in Moscow today, and Russians are saying what we have done is right to secure our own interests. Ambassador Parthasarthi, tomorrow if there is as China moved into Galwan, India moved into protect its sovereign interests. So there would be those who would see it from the Chinese perspective. There would be those who would see it from the Indian perspective. I want to understand from the India perspective, how do we negotiate this going forward? Because we need to work both with the Western powers and of course our forever friend, that is Russia.
The fact of the matter is, let's go into the first sentence of what Prime Minister Modi said to President Putin. He said, I know today's era is not an era of war. Now, that was not directed at Russia. It was almost a plea to all parties concerned to cool off and take the path of peace. Now, the fact of the matter about what is happening is that southern Ukraine, you must bear in mind, is primarily Russian population. And the Russians have had access to many of these ports, including Odessa, since the 18th century. Of the days of the Tsars. So this is the outward access. The Russians therefore took Crimea in 2014. But when the Americans came in, what they signed with the President Zelensky in September last year, was provocative. It was more or less encouraging Zelensky, who has his own visions of grandeur, to take on Russia toughly. I think if you read that agreement, it speaks for itself. I don't have to say anything. It was a provocative agreement.
Yeah.
Now, the Russians intervened. I think, in fairness, what they had not banked on was the extent of US and European support which would pour in. They have responded. And Europe, Western Europe may soon find itself freezing, especially countries like Germany, without Russian natural gas come winter. So that is why the Prime Minister's advice, God's sake, sit down and find an agreement. Don't shout at each other. And that can only be done by dialogue. Now, coming to the problem itself at present, I think they have taken 4 cities in the south, 4 provinces in the south, but the most important were Luhansk and Donetsk and 2 others. But now they have direct access to Crimea, to the sea where their fleet is located. You cannot deny Russia, even under any international order, access to the sea which it has enjoyed for centuries, and certainly through the Soviet era. So I go back to what Prime Minister Modi said. The Americans are enjoying this. It's Russian and Ukrainian lives, and they are sitting back and pouring in some money. The Europeans are now getting worried because they are going to face sanctions. So the best solution is for them to sit on a table, guarantee the Russians access to to Crimea. In fact, when I was there in Moscow, we used to have almost guaranteed access to Ukraine, to the ports there. So I think there is no solution to this. The Russians will dig their heels in. Unfortunately, lots of lives will be lost. The Western media will scream. The Russians will naturally be self-righteous. But the answer is dialogue. And the answer would have to be that Russia, whether it takes over or not, is different. Because they have taken over largely areas with a large Russian population. But the answer lies in finding a solution which prevents Ukraine and those who encourage it from stopping their access to the sea. Their whole existence depends on that.
No, absolutely. And somewhere that's the big threat to sovereignty. You talked about that agreement in September between Joe Biden and Vladimir Zelensky, or America and Ukraine, which actually said it's a strategic security partnership. Quite literally, it gave access for American warships in the guise of military exercises to come into the Black Sea. If you were to understand and do I interpret it wrong? Now, did that force Mr. President Putin's hand, or was there another way to go about it? 219 days of war. Did Russia want something like this, the extent to which this conflict has stretched? These are questions that remain. I just want to quickly put out the India view before we go back to Dr. Kharge. Now, this is what the Russia-Ukraine war, it is India's stand. 16th of September, Prime Minister Modi told President Putin at the SCO, today's era is not a war. We just had Ambassador Parthasarathi mention that. France and US backing India. We had the External Affairs Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar at UN saying, matter of profound concern for the world. Stop hostilities, return to dialogue and diplomacy. No justification for violation of human rights and international law. There's a need for independent and objective investigations. Now, this is what India's point of view is, because human beings, civilians, innocents are caught in the crossfire. So, Dr. Kharge, does that not weigh upon Russia?
First of all, I want to say that if you have a good memory, not short memory, you can understand how many jewels, how many stones on the crown of the Queen Elizabeth was stolen from Indian treasures. And right now we can see that India becomes the 5th economy, and right now United Kingdom becomes the 6th economy of the world. It's a karma, if you believe to karma, come back to the United Kingdom and to the eastern, to the western part of the world right now. We can see is a lot of challengers, not to Russia, to Western countries. That's why that they're fighting Ukraine. Ukraine is not a question about a conflict between Russia and Ukraine. You know this very well. You know who is the partnership. The most beneficial country right now in the world who take a lot of benefits from this conflict, of course, United States of America. But Europe is completely destroyed, and the United Kingdom also. You know this very well. You can see what happened with the pounds, with the currency of United Kingdom. Right now, I completely agree with the previous speaker that only one way is sit to the table and make good negotiations with a peacemaking dialogue together. But in this case, the role of the mission, we can say, of India, India can be the peacemaker, the global peacemaker. India can support UK even, support Europe, because Europe and UK, like right now, they're suffering a lot because of the energy crisis, because of the destruction of the economy, everything. I can see that Mr. Modi, he's a very wisdom guy. He's following to the traditions, he's doing yoga. He is like a spiritual leader of the world. He can propose to all European leaders, to UK leaders, make a strongly negotiation to sit to the table. And right now, all Russian lands.
So, but is Russia ready to sit?
Not annexation. I completely believe to the peacemaking conversation, peacemaking dialogue.
Is Russia ready to sit at the dialogue table? Russia, see, the whole story is that it's Russia that's pushing the conflict. Is that true? Or is Russia sitting open to sitting at the table and sorting this out?
Right now,
Yes, Mr. Doronov. Dr. Doronov, can you hear me?
In current situation,
Yes,
Russia bring all this our lands and protect our Russian population on the eastern part of Ukraine. Now we are happy to protect our population. We are ready for the conversation. We are ready to dialogue. But dialogue cannot be happened without the participation of other countries. If India sincerely will help to Europe, will help to Russia, we can bring peace to the Europe. I completely believe to this, and that role of India right now is the most important role. I believe that Narendra Modi, like a spiritual leader, can bring peace to the Europe. I believe to this.
You believe that Prime Minister Narendra Modi can play an important role? Aarti Tikku, what is your assessment? Is Russia going to be is it going to wave the peace card and say let's sit and talk, because now they seem to have the upper hand after this referendum and the announcement made by President Putin today?
But President Putin has also hinted that he's ready for negotiations. And if you remember what he told Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the SCO meeting, he said that he is willing to sit on the table and negotiate with President Zelensky, but it's the NATO which is not interested, which is the United States of America which is not interested in any peace. Clearly, Joe Biden administration seems to be enjoying, there is a certain, I would say, perverted pleasure that they're drawing out of the misery of Russians and Ukrainians and entire Europe. So it's really unfortunate that they are actually trying to retain the US supremacy at the cost of destruction of Europe, Ukraine and Russia. So it's quite unfortunate, but I do think that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has made an effort. He still, in fact, when he did say at the SCO meeting that this is not the time for war, he was really appealing to both sides. He was appealing to NATO, he was appealing to President Putin that come and sit and talk. This is not the time to war because it's affecting the whole world. If you look at the prices of energy, if you look at the prices of food, the inflation that the developing world is seeing, or Africa is seeing, the underdeveloped world is seeing, it's all because of this ongoing war. So I don't understand who it is benefiting except for the United States of America, for which I think the only issue at hand is the US preeminence, supremacy and their own unipolar world. I think this whole battle is about retaining American unipolarity and its supremacy.
But how does America come strong out of this? And if that is the case, then shouldn't the world call out America's bluff? Why should all of Europe fall for this if it is purely just about establishing American hegemony, Ambassador Parthasarathy? Is that the only case? Why would nations want to plunge themselves into energy crisis because they buy bulk of their energy from Russia?
Look, when the Soviet Union broke up, there were bound to be territorial issues between the constituent elements. Most of them have been sorted out. Some still remain to be sorted out. Now, in the case of Europe, they are playing second fiddle to America. I know for a fact the Germans just did not want to get into this business. What is the price Germany is going to pay? It's people freezing in winter. The same thing is going to happen to other parts of Europe dependent on Russian gas.
Right.
Already you've seen in the sea gas pipelines being blown up. So this is why we go back. Don't we say in Hindi, apne hi pair par kuladi nahi maro. Don't take an axe to hit your own leg. I think you sit down and talk.
Right.
Because the Russians, as I said, have a population there. They're Russian speaking, as far I've been to Ukraine.
Yeah.
And they have an interest in it. But and historical access to the sea has to be guaranteed.
Right.
Beyond that, I don't think anyone in the world will agree to any Russian territorial claims, and I'm not sure they're making any.
Right.
So let's sit down
and talk.
Mr. Modi made the offer. G20, as you rightly noted, would be a good area where it could be furthered, because even Mr. Modi went to the extent of thanking the Ukrainians for looking after our students.
Correct.
So we are not into sides in this. We just want to see a return to peace.
We are on the side of peace, and somewhere it looks like now we hear what Dr. Dvoryanov is saying, that they want India and Prime Minister Narendra Modi to play a pivotal role in trying to establish peace and get everybody on the dialogue table. Well, here's a chance. Let's see what happens at G20 or even before that. I thank you, Aarti Tikkuji, Ambassador Parthasarathy, and Dr. Dvoryanov. Thank you for your time and for your views. We're going to take a very short break. When we come back, it's a Friday evening special. It's a great conversation with J. Sai Deepak on India, Bharat and Pakistan. Book 2 of his trilogy, tracing the origin, the thought process of our Constitution. Stay with us.
It smashed into Florida coast with the wind speed of up to 241 kilometers an hour. Roofs were blown off, floodwaters surged inland, and trees ripped out of the ground. $2.4 million homes and businesses in Florida were left without power. The Category 4 hurricane was later downgraded to a tropical storm, and people have been urged to stay put in shelters.
Queen Elizabeth's death certificate states that the 96-year-old died of old age. The document was signed by her daughter, Princess Anne. Britain's longest reigning monarch died at her Balmoral estate in Scotland on the 8th of September, around 3.5 hours before the news was announced to the world. Vladimir Putin's partial mobilization orders have triggered massive traffic jams at the Russia-Georgia border.
The mass exodus of men, either alone or with their families, began on the 21st of September, shortly after Putin's address to the nation. It has only been growing since then, with airline tickets mostly sold out or completely unaffordable. Russian men filled up their cars and joined the long lines snaking on roads towards the borders. According to the government of Georgia, more than 53,000 Russians have entered the country since last week. There is rising fear of travel bans and possible border closures, with reports of some men already being turned away by Russian bodyguards. Putin announced a partial mobilization to add at least 300,000 troops to its forces in Ukraine. In Russia, almost every man is considered a reservist until the age of 65. Having personal combat or military service experience is the main criterion in the call-up.
All right, Russia will formally annex 4 Ukrainian territories Friday. The signing ceremony will take place in the Kremlin. 4 Ukrainian regions which have been occupied by the Russian army, which includes Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson and Zaporizhia. Moscow has organized referendums in all these 4 regions. This move comes 8 years after Moscow annexed Crimea. It's a big blow. Indian pacer Jasprit Bumrah has been ruled out for the T20 World Cup after he complained of back pain. Bumrah did not play the first T20 against South Africa on Wednesday. Bumrah travelled to Bengaluru to undergo fresh scans on his back. After Team India's big win on Wednesday, fans got a glimpse of Virat Kohli's video call with wife Anushka Sharma. We'll leave you with A lawyer tried to run over a woman traffic constable near Mumbai, and this is what ensued.
The constable had seized the scooter of an advocate for alleged violation of traffic rules. The scooter was kept in a godown meant for seized vehicles for further legal procedures. But the lawyer landed up at the godown to take away the two-wheeler. When the cop tried to stop the lawyer from exiting the building, he knocked her down with the scooter and tried to flee. He even tried to assault some men who came and confronted him. The lawyer was arrested based on the cop's complaint. The woman cop suffered injuries on her leg and hands from the fall.
Prime Minister Modi is on a 2-day visit to his home state Gujarat. He led a grand 2.5-kilometer long roadshow in Surat and then went to Bhavnagar to launch a slew of development projects. Gujarat is going to polls later this year and the ruling BJP is leaving no stone unturned to ensure that it retains power. Later in the evening, Prime Minister Modi went to Ahmedabad. He declared open the 36th edition of the National Games, the country's elite multi-sporting competition. He stood in an open-top motor vehicle adorned with the branding of the National Games and took a lap around the packed stadium that's named in his honor. Dozens of students were trapped after a fire broke out in a coaching center in Kanpur.
At least 25 students were trapped at the coaching institute on the first floor. The fire started on the ground floor of the commercial building, preventing the students from escaping. Even the fire department officials were not able to enter the building as a result. Eventually, the students were rescued from the windows. All the students managed to get out with only minor injuries. Police said that the building didn't have an operational emergency exit. The fire department is checking if the complex was ever issued a fire clearance certificate.
From the 1st of October, Delhi's Indira Gandhi International Airport will become India's first 5G-enabled airport. What does this mean? Passengers flying in or out of Delhi can experience 5G services. 5G services will be provided at the domestic departure pier. In fact, 5G services will also be there at the international arrival terminal, the baggage area in T3.
Welcome to this very, very special effort, ladies and gentlemen. It's not often that we give way to debates and have conversations. But this one is a must-have. It's about this book, which is India, Bharat, Pakistan. The author is sitting right next to me. This is part 2 of his trilogy. And he is somebody who needs no introduction. So JSD, a good friend. J. Sai Deepak, good to have you with us. Namaste, namaskaram, how are you? India, Bharat, Pakistan, constitutional journey of a sandwiched civilization.
Right.
Now this sandwiched civilization is clearly Bharatam. Right. Now let's come to book 2. Right. The premise of this book. Right. See, book 1 set it up. As you understood, we understood civilization, coloniality, and of course our constitution. Am I right or wrong in saying that it all started in trying to understand where is the genesis of our constitution? That's where your journey started?
Correct.
You took a detour. Rather than moving ahead, you've actually gone back in time.
Right.
So let's start from there. Why?
So, as you rightly said, the entire trigger for this particular exercise, which I don't think is partly academic, it's academic come civilizational and very, very personal in terms of the learning that I have gone through. So, this was meant to be a trilogy, with the first part covering the period from 1492 to 1919, the second from 1920 to 1951, and the third from the first general elections to 1977. That is almost until the end of the emergency period. So once I was done with the first book, and I started the second book around Vijayadashami of October 2021, I struggled to move beyond 1800 words from October to January. Now, this was not because of paucity of literature or material with me. I had enough material to last me for another 5 or 6 books. But somehow the flow wasn't right. And I felt that I was being mechanical in my conversation after the first book, which is to say, it's done until 1919, let's take it forward from there. Some crucial element was missing. I would call it creative epiphany, but since I'm a believer, I would call it the hand of providence, which is one day, I think around December, January, when I was getting ready for court in the morning. Suddenly I felt that I need to go back, because you see, what I'm covering so far, at least as part of the first book, was the European Christian angle. But the partition of Bharat has more than one player to be attributed to. So which is the other hand, and what is the genesis of the other hand, I needed to look at.
Right.
Now therefore you're looking at the proponents of the two-nation theory. Now you see, there is enough literature on Syed Ahmad Khan. Correct. There is enough literature on Jinnah.
Yeah.
Some of the finest books that I have read so far is, of course, Dr. Ambedkar's Pakistan or the Partition of India.
Yeah.
That was written around 1946. But a much more, let's say, researched book would be Venkat Dhulipala's Creating a New Medina.
Yeah.
And this focuses on the period from 1937 onwards. So you see, the most well-known characters and faces come to the fore, which is Jinnah and others. But I genuinely believe that the answer did not lay either in Jinnah or Syed Ahmad Khan, because I felt that there was a thought continuum, which is to say, if they were taking a thought forward, did they create it, or were they merely, let's say, torchbearers of a pre-existing thought?
So where did the genesis
come from? And therefore I went further and further and further, and this took me to Shah Waliullah Dehlavi. And therefore the period of 1740, which is after the decline of the Mughal Empire began, after they lost miserably to the Marathas, and after the death of Aurangzeb. For all practical purposes, you can treat Dakhan or Deccan as the graveyard of Aurangzeb, for all practical purposes. No wonder he is buried there.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then the brilliant intellectuals that the Muslim community threw up, both in the Middle East or in Arabia, and in this part of, let's say, the world, which is the Indian subcontinent, the Bharatiya subcontinent, there was something simultaneous about it. And it was not simply coincidence, because both the individuals, Abdul Wahab and Shah Waliullah Dehlavi, were contemporary students of Hadith in Hijaz.
Wow.
This is exactly what I've shown.
You have.
So therefore, they were taking forward a certain thought process that they themselves had received. And turns out that this thought process went back to the 9th century.
Hanbali.
Yes, Hanbali movement, Ibn Taymiyyah, from there it goes on. And therefore it has multiple schools of thought, multiple diversities, but then the broad nuances go back to the basics, which is follow Islam in the manner it was followed by the early converts to Islam. Now then you look at the exposition of the two-nation theory in the pre-colonial, pre-European idiom and language by Shah Waliullah Dehlavi. Very clearly says this is the case. He makes out a case for the existence of a khilafat or a caliphate. Khilafat, we typically assume that no, it's a resistance. No, it's not. Khilafat means caliphate.
Khalifa. Having a Khalifa.
Exactly.
So this entire Khilafat movement in the 1920s was also about Khalifa in Turkey, or try and protect the Ottoman Empire.
Exactly. Because they were effectively saying that the purpose of their faith is to break the existing social order inside out. Because according to them, as you see on banners everywhere in these days, Islam is the solution. And therefore, the way to achieve it, so if that is the end, the means to that end is jihad.
Okay.
And it needed to be given a particular political structure. That political structure is the creation of the caliphate. So that there is one Chhatrapati from their end, which is to say one umbrella, a single unified command under which different leaders and different Muslim rulers can operate. That process needs to be understood, and the theology, political theology needs to be understood if you want to make sense of Khilafat movement, if you want to make sense of two-nation theory. You cannot understand the partition of Bharat without Khilafat. You cannot understand Khilafat without understanding Shah Waliullah Dehlavi. Therefore, I had to take the detour. And I said, okay, let's now try and merge the first book's timeline, and the second book's timeline. So this goes from 1740 until 1924. So therefore, the narrative of the first book is taken forward only by 5 years, as opposed to the 20 years that I had in mind. But now I'm so much more clear in my headspace as to from here how the entire narrative goes. Because I have the British line, European line, Christian line, then I have the Arabian line, the Islamic line, how they merge, and how Bharat is therefore stuck between India and Pakistan.
So sandwich civilization comes to the fore because India was under attack and it went through, and perhaps as a civilization compared to the Americas, we went through 2 rounds of colonization. So the Mughals and of course then the British, and then you had the Portuguese and the others also coming in. So we were continuously under attack. But I'm just going to jump. But before did it shock you that it started with the Wahhabism, the whole thing with Wahhab and Dehlvi? They were all connected. Did it shock you? And there was also a connect to the Farezi movement in Bangladesh. It was all somewhere connected.
Correct. The thing is, we have all heard smatterings of each of these pieces of information in different places.
Yeah.
But until you get down to actually reading it properly, and then you say, are there dots to be connected? Or are you looking for ghosts where none exists? So I decided to literally piece the literature together. And I said there is no way that these connections can be missed for anyone who looks at all the literature together. So the best part about the existing literature is, and I must actually say this, I hope it's not a self-defeating point. My book is not original in the sense of, let's say, the literature already having existed. So you have Sri Seshadri who's written on the point, you have R.C. Majumdar who's written on the point, you have Qayamuddin Ahmed who's written on the point. Everybody's written on different verticals. But like I did in the first book, the job of a lawyer is to bring everything together to look at the macro picture and to say, how does it read? That assuming that I were to move out from the nuts and bolts, from the trees to the forest, and I'm looking at it from a 60,000 feet perspective, is it too difficult to make out this particular shape and this contour? So therefore, I had a very concrete basis to putting all of this together. So quite a few things shocked me for the simple reason that at one point, I've always been a vocal opponent of certain things which were propagated by Mr. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. But I also felt during the course of this reading that he is blamed for things more than he deserved, especially with respect to the Khilafat movement. The fact that Khilafat had achieved a certain degree of traction before him, with leaders like Tilak and Annie Besant supporting it, and specifically making a case for Ali brothers, is not something that's usually discussed in popular discourse. There's a reason for it because he magnified it and took it to a very different level altogether. That's a different issue. I'm actually trying to make the case that Gandhi was made Mahatma by the Khilafat movement. He rode on the backs of the Khilafat movement and the Khilafatists. That much becomes very, very clear. So this kind of, let's say, learning has now given a very different perspective, which is to say you will need to reevaluate your heroes and villains, so on and so forth. And there's a lot to be learnt from your detractors.
Yeah, and it's not about passing opinion per se, but to know. Because unless you know where you are coming from and what all contributed to where you are, how do you know the way forward? So in that case, you also realize that you will have to ease on the legalese in terms of the language, because book 2 is a little more easy to read.
So if you read
was that feedback, or did you also feel thoda zyada hi?
No, so here's what happened. So I'll just take about 30 seconds on this, because the process has improved my ability to reach out to the audience in a more lucid fashion in writing. One, I love speaking, and then I've been in litigation for close to 14 years now, and therefore that rigid form of writing comes to fore. So of course I practice only as an arguing counsel, but then when you summarize your oral submissions in writing, so for the court to consume, you still pack as much as possible. So the first book went through around 7 rounds of editing. Even then it was not enough, because you see, I wanted to stick to a language I'm most comfortable in. So that at least the message is not compromised on in the process of loosening the language. So I said, I'll take that risk. And most importantly, the sense of heft is also conveyed thanks to the language. Because you see, one of the objectives of the first book was that it must reach academia. Because those ivory towers, according to me, had to be completely impregnated. People had to actually open up to this particular literature. That was one of the purposes of it. In the acknowledgement to the second book, I have clearly said, I have taken into account all the feedback. I have tried to tell the lawyer within me, thoda shant ho jao, keep the gada down, and engage with the reader. And let this not be an exercise in self-indulgence. And so I have thanked them. The good part is, the effort has paid off because a lot of readers have said, this is such a refreshing way of reading it.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt it myself because the first of India, that is Bharat, the first 20, 30 pages, I said, boss, this is like legally. So I'll have to really go back and read that line again to make make sense of the line. And then, but this one has been far more easier to read and to comprehend. Maybe perhaps we have also warmed up to your style. So that's another point.
Possible.
But congratulations, I believe 25,000 copies already.
So the first print run is done of 25,000 copies. Usually the first print run of every book is about 5,000, 10,000 copies. And to be fair, India, that is Bharat, has created a captive audience of about 90,000 readers.
Lovely.
And out of which, therefore, it's no surprise that within almost a month, the book was launched on 23rd of August. We are today on the 30th of September. So the first print run is done. The second print of 10,000 copies has already sold out 3,500 copies already. So now, I would say, this is the Marvel effect in play. You've read the first, you have to read the second. If you want to read the second, you have to read the first. So the sales of the first book have also gone up. But I've been told that notwithstanding the length of the book, which is almost twice the size of the first, they found it even more readable. And so much so that hardcore history buffs are saying once you're hooked to the first two chapters, you race through the rest of the book.
Correct.
Because it's gripping. And I've been told that after that, the structure of the book effectively helps them process everything that's there. So this is how you structure written submissions in the court.
Whether you agree or disagree, you got to see once you got to decide once you read the book yourself. But it's very interesting, and let's come back. Now, you said it's a continuum.
Right.
So I'm just going to jump and ask you about, is this continuum witnessed even 100 years later after the Mupla riots and even the Khilafat movement? So the 1920s to 1920 to 1924, that period.
Right.
Now we are in 2022, so literally about 100 years later.
Right.
Do you see the thought continuum
100%.
manifest?
100%.
Will you associate the crackdown on PFI to something which is existing? Everybody talks about Salafi, Wahhabi.
Right.
So this is from the, then based on what you're saying, from the 18th century then?
So there are three levels of response. If you remember, on one of your TV debates, on one of your programs, when we discussed the CAA, I specifically mentioned that during the CAA protests in Kerala, they had taken out processions, hearkening back to the Khilafat saying, we haven't forgotten 1921 and we haven't thrown our swords into the Arabian Sea.
Yeah.
Now, that means in their headspace, there's a very clear collective memory on the basis of which they're working. Second, the phase where I speak of the Mopla outrage, I've stopped using the word riots in the context of Mopla because riots shows a level of parity. This was properly a genocide. There was no parity here. It's a massacre.
Yeah.
And the word used by the British records very clearly is outrage. And there it so happens that the Khilafatists would wear uniforms and take out protest marches. That's exactly what the SDP and the EPFI are doing right now. Because they know this has a recall value and a fear recall. It creates a fear psychosis. They're aware of it. 3, this is the continuum of the Wahhabi thought process. You see, it's around the 90s when suddenly Indian literature started speaking of Wahhabism, saying it's a new infusion into Indian Islam because of Gulf money pouring into this country. Until then, Indian Islam was effectively the product of Sufism and all that. That's what they were saying. This is such uninformed nonsense. Allow me to be candid here, because you see, Wahhabism has existed in this country since the 18th century, mid-18th century. And that it was spread with a fantastic network being created by Syed Ahmad Barelvi. I specifically pointed out across the country. And those parts of the country where they had very established seminaries which were created around his period and after that, they continue to be the flashpoints.
So there were an Ali brothers even then?
Exactly, from Patna. And Patna's earlier name was Azimabad.
Azimabad.
That's exact. So how, let's say, short-lived our memory is, that as a community and as a country, perhaps we suffer from this kind of, I wouldn't say country, because different communities seem to have different levels of memories in this country. So I'd say as a community, Bharatiyas in that particular sense, perhaps have poorer memory. We have fantastic amnesia. So there are parallels to be drawn. And I specifically say, you try to ban the SIMI, you have a SDPI and PFI.
Yeah.
You do this, some other organization will come about. They went after, let's say, Hafiz Saeed, he created a new organization.
Correct.
So you're trying to go after the form as opposed to going after the substance.
Yeah.
And I've compared this with the Raktabija Asura, as far as the Hindu Puranas are concerned.
Correct.
To say,
one drops, another comes.
exactly. So you have to find a way to contain it so that not a single drop of blood ever touches the ground. And that's only possible if you eliminate the seed itself in terms of the mindset. That mindset needs to be called out. Economics is not the way forward. It's not going to help. So there are different ways of doing it. I've suggested a few ways.
So this thought string is largely Sunni sect driven. So was that this continuum, did it have a position even against Shia and Sufi? And let me also ask you, now we know Deoband, we know Barelvis, we know so many other sects. Did they all come from the same thought continuum?
Exactly. So there are about 6 to 7 movements which came directly from Dehlavi's thought process. And there was another movement that was a contemporary of these movements, called itself an intellectual successor of Dehlavi, but was looked down upon by everybody else, Ahmadiyas.
Ahmadiyas, okay.
Okay. Now here when we speak of the CA, we have bleeding hearts in the scandal saying, we have to protect the Ahmadiyas of Pakistan. They were one of the founding communities of Pakistan. Pakistan was created by largely the Shias and the Ahmadiyas because of the growing clout of the Sunni Wahhabis, who were making it difficult for other rival sects to survive. They were issuing death warrants against these communities. So they said, you want this, we'll go some other place. So when we suddenly say, no, Shias are okay, the difference is, it's Sunni Wahhabism, there's a problem. What are we talking about? Syed Ahmad Khan's master stroke was to actually bring both these rival sects of Islam together under a single institution, which is the Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College, now known as the Aligarh
Muslim University.
He decided to have courses for both because he said, you guys keep fighting with each other, the Hindu will come up and he'll again take back state power. Our job is to ensure that the British man stays in this country so that both of us can collaborate to keep the Hindu out of state power. That's exactly the purpose of the movement, and he says as much. The good part of what I have done as a lawyer, and even if I say so myself, is I have not paraphrased, I have quoted.
Quoted everybody.
I have said, dekh lo, pad lo, soch lo.
Soch lo. That's what you've done. So, but you made a statement even on the 1857 mutiny, where largely the whole issue is that Hindus and Muslims came together to fight the British. But you make a case that the Muslims are largely under this Wahhabi movement. Came there because they realized that this is the time to strike back. And they were actually doing it so that they could bring back the rule of Islam in India.
That's why they wanted Bahadur Shah Zafar back. They're fighting for the parcham of the Mughal flag. That's it. See, it's like this. The Wahhabis, effectively by that time, have a stronghold in the Northwest Frontier province. Okay. And of course, it wasn't a province then because it was made a province only in 1901. It was a Northwest Frontier. So, Sitana and all these places, the Swat Valley is where they have this. Malka and Sitna, which is where you effectively associate the Taliban with. And I've shown the roots between the Deoband
Taliban is also an offshoot of the Deoband. Now, it's also written that Mullah Omar was a student
of one of the seminaries,
seminaries of Deoband.
Okay. So, they have their, let's say, their stronghold there. So, what they decide to do is that when the mutiny so-called starts, now obviously the British Empire is busy trying to clamp it down because it's going on for 6 to 7 months, right until 1858. So, they use this period of confusion to attack them from the outside with the help of the Afghans. Okay. They are not on the same page as the mutineers, by the way, because they believe the mutineers are collaborating with Hindus, which is not what we want. And therefore, how the Wahhabis had a problem with the mutineers want the revival of the Mughal Empire. The Hindus think that both of us are fighting for freedom from the British. And we don't realize what's exactly happening until it comes to a point where there are, let's say, sporadic fights between the two factions during the course of the mutiny. This R.C. Majumdar captures it brilliantly. It hasn't received the kind of exposition that I thought it should have. Then I thought it's not good to actually cite only one author. So I went through Qayamuddin Ahmad's book. So both of them agree that the Wahhabis were not fighting against the colonizer, they were fighting for revival. Similarly, there are portions where they agree that the Muslim mutineers were looking for revival of Islam because they had already given the fatwa for jihad. Now, the moment you call for fatwa and you call for jihad, you are not fighting for a secular purpose anymore. That's exactly where Syed Ahmad Khan comes in. He tries to defend all the parties who are Muslim in nature, and he blames the mutiny entirely on the Hindus. He says the mutiny was caused by two people, Ram Deen and Mata Deen. This is his way of referring to Hindus.
So that's his reference to Hindus. Now, we've got limited time, lots of ground to cover, but two specific questions I'll come to.
Right.
You talk about the Christian Reformation movement, and you also talk about the Muslim Reformation aspect. And then you say that somewhere they are all connected towards just converting or attacking the civilizational ethos and changing perhaps the DNA of Bharat.
Right. See, the thing is, what translates to Reformation in Islam and Christianity may be different. But it always translates to terrible period for non-Muslims and non-Christians. That much is clear. Because Islamist Reformation movement says, go back to the basics. And the moment you go back to the basics, we have had hell.
Yeah.
And when it comes to Christianity, their Reformation simply says, I will not accept the monopoly of the church over my religion. And therefore, we should be allowed, specifically the Catholic Church, and therefore we must be allowed to create multiple denominations. But then it translates to competitive Christianity and competitive evangelization. And therefore, the moment it translates to competitive evangelization, you're looking for fresh areas to convert. Harvesting souls. Therefore, the net result, you can keep reforming till the cows come home, but it effectively means we are going to have hell.
Yeah. So that's the impact on India, because both sides are, let's say, both these forces.
Any pagan, non-Christian, non-Islamic civilization is not exactly going to be treated properly the moment either of these mindsets think of a reformation.
Final two questions. One is the Sedition Act 124A. This started somewhere around 1919, if I remember correctly, or
Wahhabi period, 1863.
1863 itself.
Yes. So every time we have a discussion on sedition and popular discussions, we are being told this was for Gandhi, this was for Patel. No,
it was not.
Gandhi was not the enemy of the British Empire. They clearly saw him as a friend. For the better part of it. Okay, and they saw him as a moderate. Although he thought of himself as the extremist of that particular period, he was the Manasputra of Gokhale. Okay, who was the staunch moderate, textbook moderate. This was not for us. Because the Congress was desperate to prove its non-seditious nature in every resolution. So why would you need sedition law against them? Not needed. The extremists such as Tilak and everybody else were the ones who ultimately did this. But the obvious reason, where the historically recorded reason is, this was to curb the Wahhabi movement. So if you read the language of section 124A and you look at the parliamentary debates around that particular period as to what are the activities they wanted, you will realize that every limb of section 24A is referred to there, saying or this, indoctrination. Then let's say collection of funds. So anything which is aimed in a particular direction, which is to initiate war against the king or the queen. See, prior to section 124A, you had section 121, which is for waging war against the king or the queen. When you already had that, why did you need 124A? Because it's not just the final act of waging the war. Every step that leads towards it, from financing to indoctrination, needs to be curbed. That's why the provision came about.
My final question: in contemporary times, are you worried about what's happening in India currently and what the disposition's approach is? Is there a worry for you that what the Congress did with Khilafat back in 1920s, the BJP could be doing today?
I've been fairly unabashed about the fact that the book is not an archival exercise in analyzing the past. It is to see if the past continues to be relevant. Unfortunately, so it is. And therefore, I've consciously made this responsible statement that we are living in the age of Khilafat 2.0. My only concern is perhaps we shouldn't repeat the mistakes of the past. Because 23 years from the end of the Khilafat movement in December 1924 led to 1946 and 47, partition of Bharat. We don't want that again. We have had enough of partition. We don't want more bloodshed, at least as far as the people of, let's say, the native faith systems of this country are concerned. We have seen enough. So my only exhortation and hope is, let's not operate under a savior complex where we believe that the failed methods of the past will somehow result in new outcomes and successful outcomes just because it's a change in dramatis personae. Makes no difference. And I've also said that Congress is like a pretatma. That DNA moves from body to body. Now, which is the body that is currently possessed of this particular spirit and which needs to be exorcised? I'll leave it to the audience's imagination.
Well, you said without saying it, and there is more in this. Is there a solution? What are the ways out? What we need to do? All of that is mentioned in the book. But one thing that he says is that we've got to do it together. 1%, 2% cannot do it. As a civilization, as a collective, as Bharat, we need to do it. Jai Sai Deepak, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Good evening, this is Brastax. I'm Zaka Jacob. It's official now. The fight for the next Congress president is going to be between Mallikarjun Kharge and Shashi Tharoor. Now, one is seen as the establishment candidate, or the one who has the quote-unquote family's blessings. The other is seen as a bit of a rebel candidate, or the so-called G23 candidate. The fundamental question is this, that with Mr. Kharge, the front-runner, and the establishment candidate, can this election be seen as free and fair because he is seen as someone who has been endorsed by the family, even though they may not have explicitly said so. But every congressman and congresswoman out of those 9,000 plus delegates know who has the blessings of the family. Is this going to be a generational shift? An 80-year-old Mallikarjun Kharge as Congress president, is he the one who is going to take on this election-winning juggernaut of Modi-Shah combined called the BJP? Ultimately, if the aim of this election was a clean break from the Gandhi family, a clean break from the so-called hold of the Gandhi family, then does Mr. Kharge's candidature make that case, or does it only accentuate suspicions that folks have always had? But first, the story so far.
It's the most expected twist in the race for Congress's next president. There won't be a Gandhi in the top post for the first time in more than 20 years, but the Parivar has made sure their man is in the running. Mallikarjun Kharge, leader of opposition in the Rajya Sabha and a through and through Gandhi loyalist, filed his nomination today.
मुझे जो सहकार मिला उनको, उसलिए उनका फिर एक बार मैं आभारी हूं। कांग्रेस पार्टी के जो उसूल हैं, जो आइडियोलॉजी है, उस आइडियोलॉजी के साथ मैं बचपन से जुड़ा हूं।
From the looks of it, Congress ka haath is with Kharge. Apart from getting the Gandhi's blessings, Kharge walked into the AICC with signatures of 30 proposers who were some of the most prominent names in the party, including Rajasthan Chief Minister Ashok Gehlot, who was the first choice of the Gandhis for the top post up until his rebellion last week. Another proposer was Digvijaya Singh, who up until the morning of the nomination had declared that he too was in the race.
उनसे मैंने पूछा था कि आप अगर फॉर्म भर रहे हो तो मैं नहीं भरूंगा। उनका इरादा है फॉर्म भरने का, तो मैंने कहा कि ठीक है, मैं आपका प्रस्तावक बनूंगा।
Kharge will be going up against Shashi Tharoor, a 3-time member of parliament and a former union minister. Unlike Kharge,